this presentation. We're very thankful to have Urban3 working with us, and we're super thankful to have Joe Minicozzi here with us, principal of Urban3. We've been working with his firm for well over a year and less than a year in earnest to do this analysis. It's something we've never done in Athens-Clarke County, where we've taken a hard look at the dollars and cents of development and to see what it means for us as we try to set priorities with how our land use helps us as a community operate economically. And we want to make this a part of our pattern of reviewing development. We want to make this a pattern, if not annually, maybe every 2 years. We look at these patterns and help inform our decision making. But we want it to be something that elected officials embrace, push back on, ask the hard questions, make sure it's doing what you want it to do. And we're just thankful to have this opportunity. Joe's going to present tonight and enter into a discussion with you all after he finishes presenting. We have an opportunity tomorrow morning with the chamber at 1055 Barber at that event facility from 10 o'clock, I believe, 10 to 11:30 with our business community and institutional partners. And then tomorrow night, we have our big meeting at Clarke Central High School. First time we've had that kind of meeting at the high school in the Mel Auditorium. So want you guys to be here and listen to this. Want you to spread the word to folks to come tomorrow night if they can. Would love to pack the house for the presentation. I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thanks, appreciate it, Bruce. I think this gathering is timely. Obviously, we're in the midst of working on the budget right now. We said we'll spend about the next month with unpacking those component pieces, and of course, our future land use plan will be coming to commission late this summer, or early this autumn. And given that we have all those things happening at the same time, it's really healthy for us to actually have some real tools in our box that say, this is where we can support revenue in the community, and we can limit expenditure or vice versa. And, I think as a planet are looking at how we use our kind of urban scape and thinking, what do we want to see both aesthetically, but, what is sustainable? What can we continue to afford on the 20-year and the 50-year horizon? And so, I haven't seen some of Joe's work before. I know that it's going to be helpful for us. So, Joe, glad to have you here. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks for having me. My name is Joe Minicozzi. I'm a principal of Urban3, which is based in Asheville. And I used to actually worked in government and real estate finance. And a lot of what you're about to see are things that we figured out in Asheville. This is Asheville from the 1980s. Not a lot of people remember this Asheville. I don't know if you know this about Asheville, but it was achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. It started the Depression, and it took us until 1976 to pay off our debt. And for the most part, people just gave up on what the city is. So what you've maybe seen, who's been to Asheville? Oh, cool. All right. So what you've seen is a different Asheville. I work for this guy's company. There's a little bit of a delay in the computer, so I apologize for the slowness of it. Julian inherited a bunch of money. He put $15 million into a for-profit real estate development company. And our process was fixing buildings and starting businesses. But what I found that we were doing was having a dialogue with our community about our attitude as a company was about social justice, about business startup entrepreneurs. And we found that there was a disconnect in understanding what cities are. This is a kid's book that I found in a garage sale. It's called In the City, Town, and Country. So we've got the city, the town, and the country. It's a teacher's guide. We used to teach this stuff in grade school, but this is in kindergarten, you learn about your house, first grade, the schools, second grade, the neighborhood, third grade, you learn about regional planning. Did y'all do that? It's third grade, it's 1959. In the first part of it, this teacher's guide, it tells you how to deal with your kids, how to talk to them. I love this quote here. This is, while patterns vary from state to state, counties are usually responsible for libraries, health, welfare, et cetera. In studying the functions performed by your county, and I know that you're all a joint city county government, but in studying the functions performed by your county, you'll no doubt find there's a duplication of services, an overlapping of jurisdictions, and a lack of coordination between your county, your county and your city. I live in Asheville. Our citizens in the county got our state legislator to call us a cesspool of sin. Did y'all know that? And I talk to people in my county. I'm like, we're all county taxpayers. The city's no different. So this is one of the lesson plans. It's painfully white. It's also a little bit misogynistic. The girls are shoved out in the hallway here. But you read what's going on. There's a new factory that gets built. There's even more kids that go to school. And in blue, this is what you ask your third graders. Give 4 good reasons for building a new school. And your third graders talk about equity. Everybody should have a desk. Maybe split the class in 2, get another teacher. That's infrastructure. On the right, you read about Mr. Canfield, who lived next door to the Allens. Our taxes are too high now. If we build a new school, we'll need more teachers and still have to pay higher taxes. That is indeed true. When you buy stuff, it costs money, right? And you all know that as city council, you're talking about your budget, right? So in blue, this is what you ask your third graders. Why would some people be against paying higher taxes? Third graders, right? I know adults that can't have this conversation, but the book here, which is important to me, is remember too that many children, whether urban and rural, regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of their world, and their world is largely the space in which they live and operate. Y'all know this, particularly at the elected level, that you run into people and you have to explain to them that it's not just about their neighborhood, it's about this whole city that you have to worry about, right? So what you're doing here, if you look up the word incorporate in the Oxford American Dictionary, it says to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. By law, you're incorporated. Your state, Georgia is incorporated. Also, the United States is incorporated. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. So a city has a cash flow. It's got a revenue, it's got expenses, it's got things that it has to pay for. My city, Asheville, is worth $14 billion, which is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. Does Ted Turner just look at Facebook every single day to make decisions? Of course not. You're looking at data. So I don't know if you know this about Asheville, but the state has made it illegal for Asheville to annex any land. We're the only city in the entire state that's not allowed to do that. So those acres are all that we have. That's our commodity. That's our product. When you talk to farmers, farmers always talk in production terms. What's the crop yield per acre, the water per acre, the labor per acre, all of that. So let's just look at the city the same way with one of the crops. This is a building that we rehabbed, ground floor retail, second floor office, upper story residential. So thank you, city, for the streetscape here, the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and the street tree. Thank you, Mayor. Super awesome. People accused us of being subsidized. And I was like, are you serious? Like the whole world can walk on that sidewalk, but fair enough, we didn't pay for it. We took the taxable value from 300,000 to 11 million, which represents a 3,500% increase in taxes that everybody else gets, right? So go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. We have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%. This is about building our community's wealth, do good things and grow our wealth. And again, pushback that we got was, hey, Joe, that's $11 million. This Walmart is 20 million. Fair enough. It took 34 acres to make that Walmart happen in our farm versus our 0.2 acres. So if you just look at the gross real estate value, you're missing the point of productivity. So rather than total value, this is the taxes per acre that we're producing, the retail sales per acre. Who would have thought that a beauty salon, a tattoo shop, and a furniture store is twice the productivity of a Walmart? But it is. You know, it's just look at the data. Obviously, more residential and more jobs. So we had to make this case in Asheville to get people to understand the value and the benefit to doing downtown rehab and why it was beneficial to everybody and not necessarily just our development process, right? So I blew through a lot of information. I need you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. It's 5th grade division, just dividing the value into the acres, and that's it. So here's the thing that's kind of blown my mind about all of this is that when we talk about cars, we don't talk about cars in a miles per tank basis, do we? Could y'all imagine if I was like, my truck is 650 miles per tank? You know how silly that sounds. Instead, we say miles per gallon because all tanks are different sizes. We know that. And when you say miles per gallon, the numbers change and we should all be driving BMW Setas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to the Prius owners, but that's more efficient. It's a joke. Maybe. It's also made more dangerous. If you have a head-on collision in that thing, you're done. Anyway, that's the way in and out. So when you stack up the numbers, of all the stuff, for every dollar of taxes somebody out in the county periphery pays in single family taxes to the county, their brother or sister in the city is paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, there's the mall. This is in Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or Dallas. As soon as you start stacking your stories, you start to see how it stacks up. And I stopped at 6 stories. You don't have to do high rises or anything like that. So this is true of pretty much every city that we've done this in. Incidentally, a lot of people, when I first started doing this, gave me pushback. They're like, why do you hate Walmart? And they're totally missing the point. To show you what kind of nerd I am, I presented at the International Association of Assessing Officers Conference. Is the assessor in here? Anybody hang out with assessors? Like 3,000 of them? It's like the squarest conference ever. It makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. Anyway, this guy got up at 8:30 in the morning and did this amazing presentation on how cheap Walmarts are. Think about that. Your assessor sitting out there saying, thank you. It's going to be easy to kind of figure out the cost of this. He's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. That's efficient. So being a former government staffer, I was like, how is he getting away with this? So I went up to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he goes, 15 to 20 years. We're designing the building to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings, they're throwaway. So back to your corporation. You all are you're the board of directors for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Is that the investment that you want in your community? A 15-year commitment to your corporation. And again, don't hate the player, but we need to understand the game in order to play it. Their commitment to you is a life cycle of a cat. It's like 15 years, 20 years. I'm a dog person. It's a joke. Just trying to drive home a point about the permanence of the architecture that you leave in your community and the value return for it. So I would argue that people don't see this because we're not looking at numbers certain ways, or we obfuscate the numbers. So if I can give you a picture, if I can show you your brain with your creative thought process in green versus your brainstem activity in blue, can I make an economic MRI of your place? So back to my community. I made this when I was on the Downtown Association board because of that comment about the cesspool of sin. So this is my county, 450 square miles. We're about 4 times the size of your county. We have a big federal park right here, Mount Mitchell. This is Mount Pisgah. They're non-taxable. Just to be crude about it, they ain't paying me taxes. I don't care about it, right? It's just a park. Low value is in green. High value is in purple. That's the Biltmore estate. When the Cecil family shows up at a council meeting, we all genuflect. Their property is worth $100 million. Anybody have a $100 million house in here? How about, does anybody have a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land? No, they have the biggest gas tank, right? So rather than total value, here's value per acre. Hang on a second, there it is. So, and the thing about maps, it's like, I can read this. Let me make it easier. Here it is in 3D. So with 3D, you can actually see where downtown is. And when I presented this at our State of the Downtown address, I asked the chair of our county commission, I said, can you identify where downtown is? And he goes, oh, it's that big purple mountain. So when you call us a cesspool of sin, rather than hate on us, how about send us a thank you card for all the money we're shoveling out to the county? We're all paying 6 mills across this model. Where are you getting all the wealth? You're getting it out of downtown. Incidentally, you can see, and y'all have been in downtown Asheville, the tallest building is 17 stories. It's not like we have Abu Dhabi going on over here. Think of this as a bar chart that happens to be on a map. I'm going to drive that point home because you're going to see it in you as well. You don't have to be a big building to be potent. This is Black Mountain, which is a village of 13,000 people. The tallest building is 3 stories, right? Incidentally, I could get into this in the questions and answers, but you want to talk about equity. This is one of the wealthiest parts of our county right there. This is West Asheville, which is our version of Brooklyn. It's sort of like a mid to low wealth section of town. You can see that it's more potent than the high wealth area. Use the data to inform your public decisions. So from you to us on here, first of all, let's go through your tax system. This is a chart that we made of all the different states and how they operate. Georgia, at a local level, you're mostly property tax in blue. You have some retail tax. Oh, hello. You're not like Louisiana and Arkansas where they're mostly run off retail tax. I'm sorry, it's an unbelievably dumb way to run a municipality, because what happens when a recession hits? People don't buy a boat, they don't buy a TV. All of a sudden you can't afford your city. It's a wild way to run, but that's Alabama for you. Anyway, when you look at the tax system, this is how your tax dollar breaks down. 40 cents of it goes to running your municipality. 60 cents goes to the school system for the taxpayers in the room. Not all of the tax dollars you pay come here. to run the system. And basically, this is the way it works, that you get your appraised value. In Georgia, you're taking 40%. In North Carolina, it's 100%. So we don't get that first step. That's your assessed value. Your assessed value converts to take your exemptions off of it to get your taxable value. I apologize for the sluggishness of this. And then basically you get your millage rate on top of that to run your tax bill. And you get a sales tax credit that comes in. So we're looking at all of that to just basically show you how your money works. But we had to figure out where your money comes from first. So that's kind of your tax bill. So for a $300,000 property, you're basically paying a $1,500 tax bill with all of that gymnastics there financially. So commercial, it jumps, it's at 1,400. And then if you're residential, it's a 1,400. But if you're homestead, it drops down to 1,200. So if you're a renter, you're paying the commercial rate. That commercial property owner is passing that tax to the renter because they can't homestead, right? So that's just another, that's baked into the system in Georgia. We don't have that homestead exemption in North Carolina. So this is the way it stacks up with the tax bill and then the sales tax piece that's on top of it, the credit that comes in that wipes away. So you get a little bit more sales tax credit in the commercial property and in the renter than you do with the single family. But even with that, the reduction is you're paying more than the homestead property. So that's the math on that. Wow. Homestead, low income, sorry, it's hard to keep up with this. Low income versus homestead, if they're starting at $100,000 worth of value, over time, the low income homestead gets suppressed over the exemption. So there's like a frozen value that happens. There's also what you all just voted in November with the tax cap. You're not alone in this. These are all the states that adopted it. It actually started in California in 1978. Florida is one of the recent ones, but y'all just did it this year or last year. Couple things about the tax cap. This is what's basically going on over time and what it looks like financially. So when you start here, you get a homestead exemption discount. And then as your value is going up, it actually gets frozen and you get a lower value over time. So it takes a little piece off of that. That's good if you stay in your house for a very long time. It's different when you're the new person moving in next door. You don't get that same cap and that same discount. California, it's actually way worse because your value stays at your purchase price and stays at a growth rate of 2%. Florida's is one of the craziest. Do y'all know about Florida's tax cap? So what they do is they tax cap it at 10% for commercial, 3% or CPI, whichever is lower of the two for residential. I'm going to go ahead and admit this, but I was a recent graduate. It's from the University of Miami. We now have Carson back, and I'm not happy about that, but I'll put that aside for now. I voted for this as a renter because I had no idea. It just sounded like a good idea. But here's how it works out. This is a chart of value before the recession. So this is what's going on before the recession. It followed the blue line. That's the value of the market. People's values were suppressed down to here in the red line. So what happened after the recession is that it all cratered and kind of came back out. That's the market going on, right? And then people's taxes followed the red line. So let me ask you a question. It feels good that you've cratered and then you creep back out, but you've throttled down the ability for it to grow forward. We have this state policy, right? The price that you all have to pay for a police car, for a square yard of asphalt, is it following
Insurance.
health insurance, anything? Is it following the blue line or the red line?
A little north of that blue line.
It's following the blue line. So this happens in state after state. It feels good to vote for these caps. You all back there that vote for them. But when you're trying to manage a budget, it actually gets worse over time. And to show you how I've seen it is in Florida, in 2022, the inflation was at 7%, but they capped themselves down to 3%. So what you've got going on is this is where the world is. And they're like, oh, no, we're in happy land of 3%. So we just went ahead and looked at Florida's cost of asphalt. And over that 10-year period, the cost of asphalt's at 5%. If you just look at 1 year, we go to the Federal Reserve documents and look at from 2021 to 2022. And if the public works director is in here, you can ask them, like they've experienced this. Asphalt went up 30% in 1 year. And yet you've throttled yourself down to 3%. The simple math of all this just doesn't work. You have these state policies that we all adopt as a feel good, but no one's telling you at a local level. And this isn't just happening in Athens. This is happening in Gwinnett County and Beaufort or whoever. It's like, this is statewide. But again, it's not as bad as Florida. So your budget, we went ahead and made pie charts of it so you can have it, but this is the revenue, this is your expense. What we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on mapping what we can put on a map that comes from land use. So that's your sales and property tax. That's what we're gonna go ahead and map. So in addition to making pie charts, we made this other chart called a Sankey chart. We like pictures, but this is your money flowing in, where it goes in the general fund and where it gets distributed. So public service may be your biggest line item out, but we'll get into the cost of your physical stuff, your roads and pipes and whatnot. But anyway, we're putting those stuff on the map. So back to you all. Here's your total value. So think miles per tank, big parcels, super, super valuable. But again, not a level of productivity. So to go from total value to value per acre, here's the map change. And then here it is in 3D. So y'all know your city. You don't have skyscrapers that tall. So don't be shocked by this image that way. These don't translate into building height. You're seeing the bar chart productivity, however, of your downtown versus other parts of your county. So here the buildings, the most potent building, is 110 East Clayton, and 250 Broad comes in number 2. So let's kind of walk through some of the building types. Your downtown is a piece of your county, takes up 0.2% of your county's footprint. That's your physical footprint. Your financial footprint of your downtown is producing 8% of your property taxes. So as a ratio of physical footprint to financial footprint, your downtown is a 1:39 ratio of productivity. This is astounding. A good downtown is like a 1:6, if you're lucky. So you have a very, very potent downtown that's producing in spades to your community. However, your downtown is 56% non-taxable. So something to be aware of is this is your most fertile soil producing the most wealth. You want to be cautious about how much of it you want to chew through is non-taxable real estate. Or conversely, this is an opportunity for that surface parking lot you may own or something like that is an opportunity to grow your wealth. Again, these are choices you can make. I know the university has some of this too. Countywide, you're looking at 17% non-taxable. And we went ahead and peeled out the Development Authority has about 1%. And UGA's got about 6%. There's no perfect number of taxable, non-taxable. My city is 30% non-taxable. My county is about 17% non-taxable. We've seen Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the city is 65% non-taxable. So if you think your college has a big footprint, you ain't seen nothing until you see Chapel Hill.
Do you have we get to see the sales tax revenue related to those?
Yeah. What we can show you by state standard. Your state has a weird policy about that, but I'll get to that. We had a couple of other cities out there that we went ahead. Sorry. We had in our portfolio, we went and grabbed some SEC cities of Lexington and Gainesville. Gainesville's downtown is about 40% non-taxable, and Lexington's downtown is about 40%. But it's kind of
these are downtown.
correct. Yeah, that's what that says. And then this is the city. I'll have this whole thing as a PDF if you want. I wouldn't worry about trying to keep up with this. There's
Well, that's my hometown, Lexington. I can go to it.
Yeah, Lexington has a growth boundary. It's the first city with a growth boundary in the entire country. People think that Portland is the one that came up with that, but it's actually Lexington. Countywide, Lexington is 21% non-taxable. This is just Gainesville City. Check this out. Gainesville City is 61 square miles. Y'all are about 116. So Georgia has very small counties compared to most states. But you're basically a big city size as a county. You're 17% non-taxable. To put that in comparison, Lexington is 284 square miles, so they're double the footprint y'all are. So that's where your campuses are. This is something I want to spend a little bit of time on. This is a little bit nerdy, but I want you to pay attention to this. When you pull your properties, you've got a land value, you've got a building value, right? We can go into the model and just turn off the buildings and just see how land is valued. That gives us a good indication of what your policies are, what your practices of assessment are, what's going on. It just helps us understand the math. But this is Cheyenne, Wyoming. See this neighborhood up here? See everything's blue? That's how you'd expect your neighborhood to operate. Everybody in my neighborhood's the same land value per acre for the dirt, right? But check this out. What's going on over here? Or over here? Why is that strip have so much variety on it just for the dirt? There's no buildings there. But when I was presenting this in Cheyenne, Wyoming, it was like 8 a.m. And I was like, hey, what's going on right here where this is blue, 15,000. And when you cross the street, it doubles in value to 40,000. How does land in the same zoning category double in value when you cross the street? And the tax assessor, she rose her hand and she just yells out, you don't understand. And I'm like, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land. The more land you have, the lower the value because there's less people that can afford a large tract of land. And if less people are in the marketplace, we have to give it a discount. The mayor starts laughing. And I was like, really? I get a bigger part of your limited commodity called land and you give me a discount? And she goes, well, that's our standard. I'm like, does that work that way with diamonds? If I get a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? Surely there's less people that can afford a big diamond. And she goes, well, no, but that's our standard. And I'm like, all right, I've got 3 miles of road around this property versus 250 feet. Are you charging me for that road? And she goes, no, we don't care about the infrastructure. I said, so your money in is a corporation. You don't ever want it back. She goes, that's not our standard. So that's the reason why I was at that assessors conference, was to show them this. By the way, their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I asked them, how is this fair and how is it equitable? Now, to their credit, they're like, it's not. I'm like, where did this standard come from? Did Moses deliver this to you? Like, and they thought this joke was hilarious, by the way. And they said, no, you need to talk to Larry. I'm not making this up. I tracked this guy Larry down. I'm in the same suit, by the way. And I showed Larry this stuff. And I'm like, it's not fair. It's not equitable. He said, yeah, it's not. We probably need to change it. It'll just take a while to get through the system. Don't worry. We'll amend this. When you look at your assessment system, I want you to start asking questions about how it operates. We've given you these maps. Have a conversation with your assessor. That's essentially where your money is being printed. That's going to have a lot of questions you should be asking about equity and value as well. But this map right here is just your dirt. You would expect it to be like this in the downtown where you have higher value. But when you zoom in, the dirt under that property is the most potent dirt in your entire community. Would you have thought that? No. So ask questions. Why is that the most potent? Part of this is it's one of the smaller parcels in the middle of your downtown, so it's going to shoot up.
They had a strong drink in there. I don't.
So they drink, like maybe they charge a lot for their drinks. Who knows? But you also want to look at, zoom into the map. It's hard to see with the resolution here versus my screen, but you can see like some parcel. Your assessor is generally pretty good on this. You can see how the spine of commercial is more valuable. So it's just, they just don't look at the world this way using the software this way. They have the same software. This is Esri software, but it's just using this as an analytic check. And again, it's like looking at spines like this or zoom in closer to certain neighborhoods. But I'm just going to fly through this. This is your downtown's average land value, the Northeast. What's going to be better is when I bring the bar chart back. Normal town, 5 points. By the way, 5 points, you can see the commercial spine pop up and how well it pops up. But there's a couple of properties that are far superior to everything else. That should be a little bit more consistent. And West Athens. Let's get to the bar chart. Your commercial corridors are very consistent, except they have a couple little spikes popping up here and there. But here's the rollout. So again, this is based on those boundaries. These are the average land value per acres for those areas. One of the things that we wanted to take a look at is, let's just throw northeast of downtown neighborhood with southwest, right? You have a picture in your mind about the economic situation for both of those neighborhoods. You know them better than I do. I'm going to look at them from a data perspective. So comparing them side by side, The average parcel size is a little bit bigger over here versus over here. The average value per acre, however, is significantly higher here versus here, which means the average land value per acre is a little bit more northeast of downtown versus southwest.
So that's out North Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
Outside of the loop or inside of?
Inside.
Inside.
Inside the loop.
Inside the loop.
So again, it's just looking at it from a data perspective. This is how the valuation happens on those properties. The question of whether or not it's fair, market rate or whatever, that's a conversation y'all need to have. We're just looking at this as like a CAT scan. We're not going to make decisions for you. We're just saying here's an X-ray. Okay. Land use types. We always start with different values. We've got this histogram. So we went ahead and made it Georgia. We're going to start with the Bulldog, starting with the Bulldog red. We grabbed Vince Dooley's camellias for the second highest, and we've always got a Kirby jumping Kirby for the highest value ones. The Walmart is nowhere near that. It's coming in at about 500,000 per acre. I'm going to go ahead and leave the Walmart on the lower left so you can see how we use it like a Big Mac index. Everybody's got a Walmart. Let's just see how it stacks up. Residential property, you've got different types, low density, missing middle or gentle density, and medium density inside missing middle, and then the higher density stuff. You've got a diversity of types that a lot of cities don't have, so we're able to grab those. But starting with single family low density, it goes anywhere between $200,000 to 3.2 million across the spectrum. When you get into missing middle stuff, we're 200,000 to 1.8, so it bumps up a little bit higher for these. This one's 1.7 million. Missing middle, higher density stuff, 2.2 million to 8 million an acre right there. So that one we gave it a Bulldog because we're in the red zone now.
Are these numbers land and structure? or just-
Yeah, it's total. Think of it as this is how your tax. So it's moving the land and the building back together again. Multifamily, we're 1 million to 2 million. It's sort of all over the map. It's going to generally depend on how much other space you've got in here, how big the parking field is going to liquidate the value. And then once you start getting into denser stuff, 2.3 to 6.5 million, again, multifamily. There's a misnomer that multifamily doesn't produce. It's actually highly productive because you're getting a lot of square footage of density on the site. And then, of course, the bigger the building you get, we had to bring Kirby's going to jump for these here. But these are like 34 to 38 million dollars an acre of production versus the average of single family at half a million. So basically, these are your housing types. A roll up of what you've just seen is a bar chart. You're going to find things generally between the green and the red zone for your residential. When you get into we'll just show you a closer look at a couple of properties. Zooming in, we grab these two parcels, this parcel right here, 329 Leiden. We couldn't resist grabbing Kirby's house. We know he sold it, but there's Kirby's house at 1.6 million an acre. All right, what's that?
He hasn't sold it yet.
Oh, he hasn't sold it? Well, he's asking 4.2 million, so.
So what's the address? What's the first address?
First one is
Linden.
329 Linden.
Probably a 1/10 of an acre lot.
It's a tiny lot, but there's a couple things going on here. Sorry, I'm trying to get the slides to go with me here. Basically, the cheaper the building you make, the bigger the discount you get from a taxation standpoint. The more land you blow through and chew through, there's an additional discount. So Kirby's got that in a 2-acre parcel right there. So his market value per acre is down to here. If you look at his total market value, it's 3.1 million. That's what he's being assessed at. This house is being assessed at 600,000, but it's on 1/10 of an acre. So the productivity is significantly higher than Kirby's house. Y'all follow me with that? Okay, maybe it's offensive to pick on Kirby. Can we just let's bring Saban into this? We're talking with your staff. We turned out that Nick Saban's got a house on a lake in Georgia. I don't know if you knew that, but it's on Whippoorwill, but it's pulling 2 million an acre. So that house on Linden is actually more productive than Saban's lake house. By the way, Saban sold that. He now has an oceanfront property in Jupiter, Florida that has the ocean and this side, this dock. We do our research at Urban3. We're going to track it. But this one's at 9 million an acre. I hate Saban too, so anyway, had to do that. Okay, commercial properties, your mall is at $300,000 an acre. That's a couple of things. It's the condition of that mall, the shape of it from an architectural standpoint. But look at that vast field of parking. That's just basically a discount. This is the DeVita dialysis strip mall area. That's about 600,000. Beechwood Shopping Center is about, let's call it 2 million an acre. Still not what a townhouse would produce. And then you look at these little buildings, 1.4 million here, but now 10 million an acre for Tomorrow Tattoo. And that's because it doesn't have a parking lot. It's basically valued by its density, also location. So you don't have to have tall buildings to have potency. These are just in your downtown. We've got some Vince Dooley camellias here. This thing's 15 million an acre for a one-story building, basically. Up as high as 26 million an acre for a two-story building. So don't let your eyes deceive you. Look at the data, just see what they're doing from a productivity standpoint and what you can replicate. That's downtown. Going outside of downtown to your first ring suburbs of Normaltown and Five Points, these are where they are in the model. Let's just kind of just zoom in. What's kind of cool about these areas is that they have a little commercial core that can be replicated in your other nodes outside in the county. This is not the hard stuff to do. Downtown buildings are a little harder, but starting in Normaltown, I mean, these are just little 1.7 to 3 million an acre. This little strip right here, 3 million to 7 million. That's a one-story building at 6 million an acre. This is a two-story building at 7. This one here is 9 million an acre. It's a little weird that a one-story building is more than a two-story building, but it is what it is. This is how your productions happen. But when you do a suburban retrofit and think about growing up a little walkable Main Street, this stuff's survived because people can walk to it from the neighborhoods around it. You don't need to have fields of parking all over the place. So you have to think about the trade-offs of all of these things. You're going to get some benefit. Now going over to 5 Points and doing the same thing at 3.4, 2.3, 2.5. These have larger parking areas in them that their discount actually starts to show. Where these guys here, 7 million, 3 million. And I think the biggest lesson for me is these two buildings side by side. Independent Bakery is 11 million and Slater's Steakhouse is 9 million. Slater's Steakhouse is a little bit less value because there's a parking lot on the side of it. So again, that's less parking brings down value, but also density creates value. People don't like density or they talk about it in a way that they don't like it. They don't really understand it. It becomes a boogeyman without understanding. And then finally, to close with your mixed use types, this things start to take off. They start at Vince Dooley camellias and go up here. So 11 million, 37 million, 42 million, 40 million an acre. And again, your Walmart is 500,000. These two buildings here are 43, 54 million. And the most potent building of all in your community is this one at 67 million, let's call it 68 million an acre in potency.
It's the tallest building in town.
Yeah. But it's, how many of those can you have? Conversely, when people say, well, Joe, it's more convenient to go to a Walmart, it is indeed more convenient, but you're paying for it through a transference of loss. The other thing is the average Walmart consumes more in police services than it pays in property taxes. So just ask your police chief about that. Just be aware of those exchanges. And then finally, just to close this chapter, there's your old buildings. So this building was built in between 1845 and 1860, but it's still here. This didn't have a 15-year shelf life, right? You can actually create architecture that is with your community and that adapts. It's 14 million an acre. It hasn't always been 14 million an acre, but it's had this ability to come back. So there's a trade-off when you have different forms of architecture. There's architecture that's just one use and throw away trash. That's what it's designed for. Or there's this stuff that community and has a legacy and a history to it and has a value return in your community, culturally, aesthetically, and financially. This is 33 million an acre. This building built in 1908, when they had horse technology, is now 43 million an acre. There's lessons that we can learn from our grandparents and great grandparents. We just have to think about today and the value that they left your community. But again, this is a rich section for your community. I'm just flying through it. You have all of these examples all over your city. And again, that's the building, 42 million an acre in the background. The 24 to 15 million in this picture. And that building there is your big winner at 67.
So you do a lot of downtown in these commercial nodes. What about rural agriculture? Have any data?
Well, yeah, there's, let me go back to the model. But before I get there, I'll get to there. Some of it is rural large lot stuff just isn't going to be that productive. And it's okay if you're a farmer, you don't have a lot of, we'll get to the cost side of it. You know, an ear of corn doesn't call the police. You know, it doesn't have a high school demand. It isn't going to call the fire department. So it's okay if you have a true agricultural use, but once people go out in that environment, they bring needs, they bring cost of roads and pipes. And we're going to get into the cost side. Just to close this chapter, this is the footprint of about 5 parcels on East Broad Street, $6.2 million. And this is Walmart's $6.2 million. These are both the same value. Look at the difference in footprint. So back to the farmer analogy, what crop is more potent? Is it better to grow wheat or is it better to grow marijuana? You know, it's like, what's going to give you more production? If marijuana is legal, I don't know if it is in the state, but it's, you know what I'm saying? It's just a joke, but you want to grow the potency. So parking reduces value as well.
We go on for that, just kind of following up with there, it's just information. I mean, the examples that you showed, is there information for us in other materials you're giving us that zoom in on other areas?
Yeah.
So the business corridor on the east side, that I represent, where we've had different development. Is that in this presentation or is it in other resources that you'd be showing?
You've got this is your revenue model. So it should be, it's going to be pretty easy to just break this into, if you just want to only look at your district,
Right.
pretend the rest of the county doesn't exist.
No, you want to be able to look at that and consider the rest.
But just do that. Well, actually, you know what? Here's an idea. Think of it as are there areas that we can do surgery in our district that we can do rehab? This is the revenue side.
Right.
We'll get into the cost side in a second.
Okay.
When you look at the rural areas, yeah, there's rural areas, they're going to be what they are. When you look at the low productivity out here, that's low, sure. But what's the trade-off in jobs that are happening from a rural standpoint for agriculture, for the farm production, for things like that? What's going to be the revenue of growing crops or whatever that's going to be part of your community? Those are trade-offs.
And I'm with you on that. I just was like looking at the pictures are very effective for communicating with people who live in the area.
Yeah.
So that's, having those.
We should, I think that's a great comment to take this and go have maybe a 1-page flyer or 2-page flyer or something, like here's the whole city, then here's the district or your neighborhood. That way-
Right. I mean, we're looking at this with the future land use plan, like we had over here.
And I guess that was where I want to piggyback on too, because this is really very interesting, but we're in future land use. I would like this kind of information for my district, because I don't see, and because we don't necessarily grow crops, but we are definitely, AR and the further going down. So do you see development and maybe you see the answer, do you see development, this kind of urban development more in our rural areas? Is this your envision?
Well, no. And so I think what's being demonstrated is that notion of thinking of value per acre, right? And then we'll look at the cost side that goes with that. When we have in your district, we do have some small interspersed commercial. We have some mom and pop businesses. We have some chain retail that's out there. We have some higher density residential. We have some lower density residential. All of that information we have for every parcel in the community. So we can parse this out by commission district and pull that information together. It'll take a minute, but we can do it. What we're trying to show is those land use patterns have an economic reality too. And we can definitely show you with the current text or 2024 tax digest, how those parcels are performing, because we've got it for every parcel. That's what Joe's group did. This presentation is hitting highlights. It's not.
But that would definitely be a commitment that I would like you to make to share with that. And so my next question then again, and I see Mr. Sams is here. What you can pull out for us, will the committee also, future land use committee be privy to District 9? District.
Absolutely.
They, while they're making their you've already done community input, so.
They've already seen this.
Okay,
So the steering committee has seen.
but did they see, I'm just as transparent as I can be. Urban3?
Yeah.
Is too close to urban renewal for me. And I just the wording, that's where, my folks
I got a
are
show for you.
panicking. That's where my folks are panicking with. So we'd like to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
The further out from the city.
So, and I want to get back to Joe, but when we have been working with the steering committee has landed, I'm pointing behind you, unfortunately, Commissioner Thornton, but we've looked at corridors to be the opportunity for us to grow and using some of our underutilized land. And Joe showed us a statistic that I didn't know until this morning about how much asphalt, how much parking we have in our community. And it kind of blew his mind, and he showed us why it's kind of off the chain. We've got all kinds of leveled area on our corridors that could support new development, make better use of the land, not displace anybody, and produce these values that he's talking about in all kinds of corridors around town. And those corridors are in your district. They're in just about every district represented. And they're on the maps behind you. That's where his analysis, we kind of knew, kind of 6 months ago, we knew the revenue side. We didn't know the expenditure side. So the steering committee had the benefit of that information as they were deliberating on where to make changes on the future land use map to set the table for growth over the next 20 years. And the corridors were the hot spot because nobody's living on those corridors today. So that redevelopment, that urban renewal of something that is wasted and doesn't have somebody living in it. The biggest social justice issue with urban renewal was it was taking people out of their homes. So we were focusing on areas that don't have homes, and those may be our opportunity for putting homes.
It's like that Walmart example. You get that sort of poster child where you've got a single story thing and just a boatload of asphalt. Yeah.
And I guess with, and this, and when you talk about asphalt, our biggest problem, again, in my area is stormwater, which is a huge dollar amount.
That's right.
But we do not have the, so I just want to make sure I'm articulating the concerns that our folk in areas are paying these fees like everybody else, but we're not seeing these kind of development.
Also paying taxes.
And we're overpaying taxes. That's what Joe just said. Y'all hear?
I'll show you the data.
Okay, see there?
Let's see the expenditure part.
I have a question. So these high value properties are concentrated primarily downtown and adjacent to the university. That are high value boulevard 5 Points. What I'd love to see is other neighborhoods that have traditionally been low income, working class that are adjacent to the neighborhood that have seen an extreme hike in their value in recent years as the student population has discovered them. At one point, we did see some data that indicated that East Athens has some of the highest increases in taxable value.
It wasn't part of our study.
I don't think it was you. I think it was.
I think you
Jerry-
did show it.
I think it was some of Jerry Shannon's data.
Which one was it?
The Northeast Athens,
You did do it.
that's the area that's one of the areas that Commissioner Lake's talking about. And by comparison, one of the areas that is high dollar value and I think has a perception that's different would be the Homewood. I mean, not Homewood, Beechwood area.
Linden House, the house on Linden, that was a traditionally African-American working class neighborhood, strip off Boulevard, even 20 years ago.
But
And
even not so traditionally, like today, that Northeast Athens area that had the higher land values. And that's the disparity that I think was being represented. The land value is being taxed at a higher rate northeast of downtown. That's adjacent to North Avenue.
yeah. and
Right?
so-
Okay.
Yeah,
That's Strickland.
and that's,
That's Northview. Okay? And then by comparison, on the left, you have Beechwood. Everybody knows where Beechwood is. Everybody knows that. So the lower edge of that is the river. Right?
River is right.
That value per land, per acre of the land is less.
so when somebody comes in and buys a little cottage and flips it into, a 4-bedroom student house with, $1,000 a bedroom per month revenue, taxable value goes up. And the surrounding properties values go up.
Well, theoretically, they shouldn't because the surrounding properties aren't being used that way.
But they're zoned that way, so their values are going up. As if, and they become poached by developers who see them as higher value property. Because they have,
I've got other stuff for you if I can get through.
yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem I feel like we're dealing with. Folks are being driven out of these in-town, mostly traditionally African-American neighborhoods by a very wealthy student population. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we laid a multifamily zoning on those neighborhoods when we went through this land use process 25 years ago. On paper, they look like single-family neighborhoods, but I mean, on your eyeballs, they look like single-family neighborhoods, but on paper.
I have a discussion with your assessor about sales chasing. Because that's sort of a huge party foul in the assessor world. If I'm implying that that's what's going on, it's value that's not being manifested in its real value. They have to be very cautious about that. They shouldn't be doing it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, if anything, it incentivizes developers and flippers to,
Well, no, what it incentivizes, it pushes people out of their housing.
yeah.
I want to hear the rest of it. Yeah, I want to
You
hear.
can see the expenditure piece.
So, okay, so we're trying to make, we know we're throwing a lot at you. We haven't even gotten like a third of the way through the show. So it's like, this is, I call this the Brady Bunch slide, but this is like residential, low density, medium density, high density, mixed use, or commercial and mixed use. So if you're out into a different district further away, it's like a 2-story building or a little baby Main Street, maybe a block of it out there is going to be way more potent than something like this. Just understanding that takes effort. It takes a little bit of, you got to have that comp plan in place to do it. You have to have the zoning in place and you have to have the incentives in place, but don't have the incentives for me to waste your real estate because I'll do that as a developer and they'll waste the real estate. And that's just basically how the financial system works. But when you stack it up, again, this is just a streamlined bar chart for what we have as the full model. So the model, just don't overthink it. It's a bar chart on a big old map, right? So that's the different land uses and where they are in your model. From a zoning analysis standpoint, you have different land use patterns. You've got agricultural, single family, and mixed use and commercial, industrial. This is where they are on your map. This is if you made a chart of your city, this is how much land is each. You've got 36% of your county is agricultural. When you look at it financially, you can see how agricultural takes a big footprint. It doesn't produce a lot of revenue. There's agricultural exemptions you get. There's all sorts of things that reduce that value. It's just not, just to be cold about it, it doesn't produce dollars the way that commercial does. So commercial is 6% of the footprint. It's like a 1-to-4 ratio of productivity in your pocketbook from a budget standpoint. If you look at single family, it goes up. So we just went ahead and just like grabbed a couple of these and just said, let's just kind of stack them up. So you can see the difference. So single family does grow from its footprint to its financial, about a 1-to-6 ratio growth. Commercial is a 4 times growth, and your mixed use is 5 times growth from its physical footprint to its financial footprint. It's just that's the reality of your numbers. Your sales taxes, Georgia's a little funky. You're not as bad as North Carolina. What I'm about to show you is completely illegal in the state of North Carolina, which drives me nuts. We can get them in really progressive places like Colorado and California, South Carolina, but not North Carolina. You all have, it's called partial access. You won't let me see individual buildings, but we have enough data from other states that we sort of eyeballed it a little bit. So this isn't anything I can stand behind with 100% confidence, but it's closer than you can do just by looking at your book. So basically, here's your sales tax flow, your SPLOS, your sales tax. So we're going to grab those strings, put them on a map. So here's how it looks. Again, your downtown is highly productive from a sales tax, but also your commercial corridors and certain spots of commercial. This is what's being mapped in this model. These are some of the properties and where they are. The place is showing up as the most potent one. And so this is your sales tax. Now we're going to go ahead and lay the property tax on top of that. So think of it as like the icing on your cake. So this is basically your cash flow model for your city of your property taxes and your sales taxes. So for the citizens out there that don't, they may be buying stuff, but their house just doesn't produce the way that commercial properties do for your community. Zooming into a spine. Okay, so this is your Olive Garden. Super productive from a tax standpoint, very thin property tax. You go over to the connection, it's mostly property taxes because it's all apartments. This is Chili's, and then over here is Slater's. Okay, so I'm Italian. I'm going to go ahead and admit it. You know from my last name. I was offended that your Olive Garden is doing so well. So my mom would be pinged with this, but I just took the Slater house. This is the property tax here, and then this is the sales tax. I just put a little measurement on it to show you its potency versus the Olive Garden. So this is the Slater Steakhouse sales tax and property tax to show you how much different that is from that. I just had to do that as an Italian. Sorry, just let me have my thrill there. So your Walmart versus your downtown block and doing the same thing. This is the sales tax total revenue. So Walmart is highly productive if you look at its number gross. But when you look at its productivity per land, per acre, it's about a fourth what your downtown, that block in downtown is producing. It would be awesome if I could have the individual stores data to share that with you, but your state doesn't allow me to do that. So this is as close as we could estimate. I will ask you this, there's per Walmart, you generally have about 250 employees. That's going to work out to about 6 employees per acre here. And if you look at this block and how its potency is per acre, you typically find with these small mom and pops, they have more employees. They're paying their retail sector employee more per hour. They're also hiring the local ad executive, accountant, attorney. You're going to get more economic spin out of those smaller spaces. And this isn't to hate on Walmart. It's just so you understand that's how their game operates. So it's the property tax revenue per acre. So we have that. We also mapped, you had a significant change in your community that happened with your annexation of the or joint of the county. This is the county's population growth, and blue is the city's population growth. And you can see they joined here in 91. You joined when the city joined the county. And this is just mapping your areas over time and your density. I don't know if you know this about Georgia cities, but they all start as sort of a circle. Kind of weird, but it's a thing here. This is your population density growing as you start annexing land. So as your grandparents were growing, they're actually densifying up until the Civil War, when you see this big divot that happens with your population. With the Civil War of lost people. And then it starts to come back as you grow your city and you grow your density back up in the early 1900s. And this is again growing your city out to World War II, and your population as you're adding land, it gets a little bit less dense. And then you kind of blew out the side of the circle over here in 40 up to about 86. And basically, by the time you did your annexation, you essentially achieved 1865 Athens in density. If that makes sense. And then it just kind of falls through the floor when you annex the county. And that's just, it's sort of the dynamics of huge land change meant to your community. This is a conditional analysis. I know this joke only works for certain people in the room, but now your infrastructure side. So we're gonna go ahead and run through the cost side, mapping your public utilities, physical stuff. The way that we're thinking about your corporation, my land would be worth nothing until you ran a road and a pipe to it, right? So once you put that road and the pipe to it, am I giving you enough money back to pay for that road and the pipe and the physical infrastructure? So we're gonna look at your water system, your streets, your stormwater, which is this little green one right there. Here are your structures, or think of them as your veins of all of them. They're all different. They're not the same from a distance standpoint. So you have enough stormwater to go to Spartanburg if you stretch your stormwater pipes end to end. Your sewer will get you to Richmond. Your water will get you to New York, and your roads will get you to Portland. So here's a dirty little secret. You get to rebuild that in perpetuity, right? If I'm a developer and I build you a subdivision and hand you those free roads and pipes, they're not free. They're your community's liability over and over and over again. So one of the weird things about finance is the finance officer in here. Your finance department books your roads and pipes as assets. And whenever I talk to finance officers, my computer is an asset, my delivery van, my office is an asset. I can sell you the office, the van, and the computer. And Athens pick up its roads and pipes and sell them to Gwinnett County. No. So those are liabilities. You should see them as a liability ledger. So when you look at your depreciation schedule, that's actually what you have to pay in the future. It's not magically disappearing in value. So you have to fix those pipes, that water tower. So the cycle for roads, when you build them, they have about a 50-year useful life. If you do different maintenance and you keep up with it, you can extend that life to 100. But basically, talk with your engineering department. You have preventative maintenance and resurfacing that happens in 10-year cycles. In the 50th year, the deep cut. What the community needs to understand is that's super expensive. You're essentially building the substrate of the road back. And then the cycle starts all over again. This is something every city has sort of forgot or ignored in the last 60 years or so. Their roads are forever and they have continuous payments. So we're going to go ahead and put that reserve account into your budget and show what that does. This is what you have for your infrastructure. For your roads. You should be spending about $47 million a year. What you are spending is $26 million. That's a deficit. You're underpaying your roads. This is your, this is your water system. It's a little closer here, but it's still a deficit. This is your sewers. Your sewer is pretty close. And then this is your stormwater. Again, pretty close. Just a $2 million deficit here. Now, there may be spots like your neighborhood where there's inadequate stormwater infrastructure. I don't know. That's a conversation to have. But everybody should have a fair, equal.
And that is
Stormwater.
what I'm concerned about in my district.
Yeah. So I think that's not a question for me. I'm just doing a CAT scan and going, there it is.
And that's just dealing with what we have.
Correct.
We don't have.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So this is just looking at those same bar charts, stacking it up, and then seeing the deficit. And then I think we do a roll up of them side by side in the deficit of each of these. So you're going to have a $30 million hole in your budget that is just, you can kick it down the road, but it's still going to be there. So one of the things that we looked at is if you could have a tab, if you can give me a check for all of this, what would it look like to the citizen? Per capita, it'd be a $13 road charge, $1 charge, $1.08 for stormwater, $3.50 for water, and 40 cents more. That's just if you're just penciling that out, what it means to the citizens in your community to pay that off and make these two lines equal. But right now they're not. So taking your money, so this is all your money coming out of your ground and where it all is. So that's the money flow. Then we're gonna do the same with the costs. And it kind of lines up. Downtowns are expensive, but they're producing a lot of money. Yeah.
So could you go back to the receipt slide? Oh, okay, here we go. So transportation, what would be the example? Transportation.
That's a good question. A lot of what's kind of funny to me, like it's common to see like a sewer fee, right? I pay for a sewer, there's a pipe in the ground, I gotta pay for it. But we tend to neglect the fact that roads are utilities too. We just have them as an account in the public works department. There are cities that have, it's called a transportation utility fund. And that's what their roads money is. And they charge people a charge based on the road fee. You can do it through a vehicle mile, VMT. The more miles you drive, the more you're using the road. And your vehicle miles traveled is a one-to-one relationship on what you pay. Some communities do it based on district. The further you're out, the more roads you're consuming. But again, that's a judgment call. I would think that what I would advocate is you should have it as a fee for your community, so the consumers, your citizens and shareholders know you've got to pay for that stuff. It's a utility that makes real estate useful. The same way that a pipe.
Transportation, roads, intersections, bridges.
Correct.
It's not transit.
I don't think so. I think it's all just the physical
Okay.
stuff. I've got a list in one of our sheets that I can go to. I'm pretty sure it's just all the physical stuff because the pipes we're just looking at lift stations, force mains, manholes, that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's the money. This is the cost. Taking the cost and pushing it down into the ground and then floating the money on top of it. This is what that looks like. This is a side view if your whole community were floating in a lake. Think of it as like looking at the side of a boat. What's below the water line is sunk costs and the money is sitting on top of it. And then it's going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this. And then this is the net position of your community. So what's in the black popping up, what's in the red is sitting at the bottom. And then here's your whole county in 3D. So you have that $12 million deficit and then you're actually not bad. I've seen a lot worse than this. But this is your return on investment. If we lift this model up like we're looking from the bottom, 20% of your community is covering the 80%. But to be fair, a lot of this stuff out here is incredibly low density rural areas. You want to be cautious about stuff that's in the center where that's an opportunity for infill or rehab or yes, sir.
Repeat that again, land area. So 20% of Athens-Clarke County is paying for that 80% deficit.
Correct.
Wow.
So what we basically did is just we asked the computer if we could, how much of this area is in black and how much of this area is in the red. And the number is 20% paying for 80%.
That typical?
Yes.
And that's annual.
Correct.
And that minus 12, the deficit of 12 million, that's where we are current.
Correct. But the thing is, okay, you may ask, hey, Joe, if you're so smart, like, why aren't we just broke right now? And I'm like, well, you're not paying for that police officer. You're not having the parks funds that you need. Somebody back there didn't get their pickleball court this year. You know, there's things that you're not meeting your expectations, or you're letting a road go maybe a couple more years and it's not that bad. People are just dealing with bumps. So it's just a level of assuming a certain level of service. Yeah. Cities don't go bankrupt. You know, we tend to hear about the Stockton, Californias or the Detroits, but that's a rarity. What typically cities do is they start cutting services and quality of services before they go bankrupt because y'all don't want to lose your credit rating. And the credit companies know that. So anyway, looking at the bottom of the model, this is the bottom of the model. You have a couple that are really big spikes, but mostly it's just a thin level of subsidy across the model. The biggest spike is, I think, see here, it should pop up. Yeah, the poultry processing plant. So that's going to be a trade-off. We're getting a lot of jobs out of that. Again, or maybe you don't want it. I don't know. It's your call. So one of the things that we did is, these are some of the big producers in your community. They're net positive, and what their net production per acre is. And then taking that same Brady Bunch chart and stretching it out. All of this is net positive to different degrees, from $6,000 an acre to $245,000. And these back here, low density commercial and low density residential, are net losers. Now, this isn't to say that these are bad. It's just how much can you afford to carry of that? And that's going to be y'all's choice. You know, so it's just, if that's a value judgment on your community to have that development type, great. You know, but just pencil it out.
There's two different, on that chart, there's two commercials, two mixed use. These are specific locations. Are they tied to those?
These are tied to an average in that area, but we use the type of building from the picture that meets that number. So this building here is going to be about 192, but anything that's in that residential high density bucket is going to be in there.
What's the difference between those two commercials down at the other end?
So that's the strip center at Alps. Right there. Yeah.
Here, there. So this is a higher density.
Yeah.
So low density, medium density, high density. So see how it's got this little orange color? That's a
Yeah.
medium density commercial. This is a low density.
Okay.
This is high density, high density, high density. You see the reds.
What is the yellow one, the 49,000? Where's that?
I don't see that. It's hard to see.
It's the bottom.
Oh,
So I think medium density mixed use is what that would fall under.
Yeah, and I understand. We're in the same suit again. You know, it's funny. It's like, there's a lot of desires that folks have in their communities. I have a desire. I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think that'd be awesome. And give me a pickleball. Now, this would be great for me, but we have to weigh what's good for the community and how does it all work from an equity standpoint. So your infrastructure and growth, going back to your time periods, let me just jump ahead on this one. If we look at over time in those tree rings of how you grew, there's your older patterns. This one in particular is super potent. And actually what you did between 1875 and 1895 and 1926 to 1944. Well, but the thing is what happened is with post-war development, and this is not unique to all of us, we were sold a bill of goods and no one really penciled it out long-term. They just was like, we're going to change the way we do cities. And it was a really cool idea. But here we are 70 years later, looking backward and going, can we actually afford this? And you see that precipitous drop you get out in the region. So basically splitting your county into a pre-45 community. Your pre-45, there's some red spots in here, but it's still net positive 13 million, while your area outside of that is a net deficit of 25 million. There's still some areas that are good out here. They're doing all right.
So in other words, we need to move inside and put all the infrastructure close to the interior, correct? Instead of.
No, and you could do a lot of things. You could go out here and do, there's some red spots out here. You can do some selective surgery in different areas, but yeah, growing inward, you're already paying for that infrastructure. So if you have a surface parking lot sitting over here, it's going to be red because it's just not producing. That's the reality of that production. Now, the trade-off of you having a surface parking lot or this building being non-taxable, that's a trade-off. You have this for the community to come here. There's ample parking to come to the meeting. That's a trade-off.
And you gave the examples of the years, and not trying to throw no shade. When we became unified in the early 90s, this information is new now, I guess, but we really weren't prepared where you're describing, because I think after unification, that's when you saw inner city Athens grow and the outer areas left behind.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things. I think that the financial industry's changed a lot. You know, Asheville, we had a red line map. Y'all didn't have one, but we had different practices here that are very rhymes, you know? So when we look back at history, there's a lot more policies and procedures and practices that also skew how those models grew. There's different incentives that were put in. We can't interrogate everything in this process. But it's just what can we measure that what's going on now. I tend to think of this like a body, like I can't continue my habits as a 20-year-old into my 50s. You know, I'll have a heart attack if I eat pizza every single day. But I know that that was a problem in my past behaviors that I'm going to resolve with today in my blood.
So one thing that happened in the 90s is the university started jacking up its enrollment. The Hope Scholarship came into play and the population of universities went up and up and up. That might have something to do with that kind of disparity in growth that we see. They were concentrating in town,
Yeah.
near campus, near downtown.
You've also got Airbnbs coming to town.
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
So
But the real change on that historical one is from the 1945s on, is when we started not, and that's I have a car, I drove here in my car today, but that's where we had more infrastructure to pay for because we were going further out. Cars and such, no, I mean, not in that.
well, it was incentivized. You get a lot of state funds that come in for roads. There's
Yeah,
federal
yeah,
dollars.
yeah.
It became easier to make that choice.
That was the
But
urban renewal era.
but that's the long-term cost wasn't always
Exactly.
built in. Yeah.
But you know, a lot of these costs were figured out in the 60s, and the federal government produced a document called the Cost of Sprawl in 1973. So here's a question. If we all knew that sprawl was too expensive in 1973, your predecessors from 1973 to today,
50 years.
why haven't they done this? And it's because we have a habit to not look at the data. You know, so it's inconvenient. It makes us a little uncomfortable. Yeah, so, you know, it's just start with what you can measure and what you can manage. And I'm going to blow through this section. This is taking the ingredients of your city and you can make a different cake. I'm not going to bother with, these are really dense slides, but basically the concept is we took your current city and then put together several sites of study and what could grow there and the projected growth. These are the different parcels. I won't go through all of them. Oops, sorry. But come on now. Several Firefly along Firefly Trail, the shops at South Millage, Willowwood Square. These are all within your existing zoning capacity, but you can see what they are and how they would pop up if development happened. So you can actually look for areas for strategic infill or strategic projects where it's the right place to do that development and grow your wealth out by the airport, even out here. So going back to your cost model, saying here they are and growing in net positive because of their density. You're going to get $3 million of positive impact out of those projects. So that takes your deficit down. I'm not even going to bother with this slide. This is too dense, too much information. But basically, these are the different projects. We just put townhouses, mixed use, a hotel and mixed use and townhouses here. And then this is the net value production. So obviously, if you use higher density mixed use, you're going to get more production out of it. So coming in second is multifamily and retail at the shops. And then back to the model. So going to your deficit of 12 million bucks and saying if we add those projects in, that takes $3 million out of that. That gets us closer to a zero deficit. You know, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 8 projects. So just to close, I mean, I usually close with comparing a city to a football team because everybody knows a football team's a business. Well, this is a business, right? Happens to be a college, but so I looked up University of Georgia football program. Like I would know, like the cups in our nightclub that we owned cost 5 cents. How do I know that cups cost 5 cents? Because we sell beer. And we made a choice between plastic cups and compostable cups. And we wanted to make sure that we could afford compostable cups because that was part of our values. They were 5 cents a pop. So that touchdown right there, those 6 points earned the program $2.8 million. It's a $270 million program. Did y'all know that? So your city is worth 18 billion. Y'all are on the board of directors for an $18.8 billion corporation. What you are. The football program, I don't know its value, but I know their revenue. So y'all's revenue is 183 million. Theirs is 207 million. You're getting that 183 million out of 130,000 people. So that pencils out to what each taxpayer pays or each community member pays to your community is about $1,300 a person to run an $18 billion corporation. Oh, come on now.
Obviously.
So when you divide if you have 6 sellouts to run that program, that's 588,000 people buying tickets, or the price per person is about 372,000 or $372 in revenue. You all are running a bigger corporation costing way more, and you have not that much more money to run the program. What citizens need to understand is how expensive a city is. We're totally cool that our football team has a really cool bus. They have this incredible training facility. They get flown around. We want them taken care of. Well, you got to take care of these people that cut down trees, that fix pipes. Maybe Kirby and Bobo should get out there and help them. Or maybe they can help with a pipe. Just kidding. Okay, I'm going to close with now what I do want to talk about equity in the tax system after this, if you'll allow me. But you want to work with your regional partners, have a conversation with the school, see if you can help keep them accountable for working together. They are an impact on your community. I understand they're a 900-pound gorilla. This happens in every college town. But there are places where you can have win-win situations. In Princeton, the school builds housing for seniors. And then they know the seniors are eventually going to pass on and the students move in 50 years down the road. But they're building for a long term. And it's taxable. Duke University does this. They build affordable housing for professors. So know your costs and consequences. You have this model now. Start talking with your citizens about this and the cost of things. Your infrastructure is forever. It's going to be a problem forever. Here's the roll up of the situation that you're dealing with. And again, this is just the physical hard stuff. You want to thicken up. You want to go back to those parcels where you might have where you already have a road that you're paying for. And think about the potency of what the thickness looks like or the ingredients. As you spread out, as you stretch out, it just gets expensive for y'all. And that's the lesson from what you have over time. And definitely the pre and post 45 city. Think of it as two different places. Now, this isn't to say you could do everything in here. You could have little baby things going on out here too. Think of it's different in different places, basically. And then you could do incremental adaptations like these as well. So this is just a sample we put together with your staff to show you the potency of these projects were to come through, and what it could do to your bottom line, basically. And then finally, little buildings can have a big impact. So don't think that all this stuff needs to be a mixed use 10-story building. It could be these little things that you see at 5 points, this little 1-story building at 11 million, or this at 7 million. It's like little things that can happen in neighborhoods, but this is dependent on what's around it as well. It's an ecosystem. And I'll end it with that. Thanks.
Read this book. Can you go back?
Oh yeah, it's a book called Strong Towns by Chuck Marone. A lot of what I've just gone through is covered in this book. He just has a great way of writing a very easy to follow story about them.
And a good podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got a lot of content.
So did we talk?
So a couple of things, you did not talk about manufacturing or enough development. What do those industries brings in from a tax base?
Not a lot. You know, it's gonna be jobs though. So it's gonna employ your people in your community. But if you think of like an Amazon distribution center, it's just a really big cheap box. And the stuff that flows through it is just stuff that flows through it. Not a whole lot of jobs on that floor either. If you look at a manufacturing plant has got a lot of heavy equipment in it, but it's also a massive footprint. It's just a trade-off. You know, it's like, if you want to have those jobs and not be so dependent on the university, that's going to be a trade-off. You know, the university is non-taxable.
So again, we got a miser coming in town, 1,700 jobs.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure what the tax base, but it could leave, I'm not sure what the tax base would be on something like that. On a plant that size, you don't employ that many people. So I'm just trying to figure out.
You had one slide that showed a couple, you went through it real quick. I mean, that showed a couple of industry things.
You talk more about Walmart than.
Yeah, but
There was one with.
it tends to be more land use.
There was one with.
You showed the country.
Yeah,
They had a couple of other things there too.
yeah, look at that.
That's what Bellary were.
Write down the title.
You know, and
I think my other question is, you made a statement about partnership with the university, well, the thing about pushing to do, you know, private universities, they can do that. UJ, unfortunate, is
Okay, well then, Chapel Hill.
Chubby, okay.
Good one.
So, one of those type of, I think that was a great idea. I know years ago, one of the things that UJ had put on the drawing board was building a senior citizens center, actually right on campus. It just fell by the wayside. So again, maybe those things could, maybe those conversations.
Conversation up again, yeah.
Could, and not for much detail and timing. First of all, did you talk about the tax thing? Did I miss that about the tax base? Did I miss that?
No, can I get into that?
Well, let me ask the question then first.
Okay.
Can you direct me or direct me to the information where their housing that were?
Remind me in a moment.
On this, understanding their trade-offs, I'm just thinking about zoning decisions, making zoning decisions. Do communities, like, you know, just like I want to have like when I go buy a appliance, I like to know a little bit about what the cost is going to be to run it, right? And we got those Energy Star things, which we won't get into the fact that they may be going away, but they're there and they're helpful to know about the cost.
Yeah.
So when we're doing making planning decisions, I'm not wanting to just base everything on what the highest amount of money we can get in, because there are trade-offs, right? But do communities do this kind of analysis that gives elected officials, you know, something to work with
Yes.
on that? Because
It's audit. It's like basically it's like, think of your nutritional facts,
Mhm.
right? If I eat pizza, and I still do, go ahead and admit
Yeah.
that. But I know that I eat pizza once a month.
Yeah.
And if I do that, I'm eating salad, I'm going on a mountain bike ride, I'm doing all these other things to compensate
right,
because I have a family history of heart disease. So I know the nutritional facts of pizza. I'm not giving up on pizza. I can't.
right.
You know, I love it. So, but I also know that it's just loaded with fat and things that are going to kill me. So I have to balance that. So if you think of each decision, okay, so we've gotten a couple slices of pizza. Our community needs pizza right now.
Yeah.
But if you're having pizza every single day, you're cratering your community. So as long as you're keeping track of that and just saying, we've made a couple of choices, we all now know, you know, just so the community knows too, that there are costs that are long-term, and it might be worth it for that cost today, but yeah, you want to basically evaluate each project.
Some term for that,
It's
that's
a
like
development evaluator tool.
a development, and some communities just put that in their agenda.
So that's basically, we've given it to you. And it's just, the next step would be produce a measuring device out of that software. But yeah, we've done that with communities. I'm trying to think like, oftentimes they handle it with impact fees, but impact fees aren't necessarily fair because there's a lot of subsidy that's currently being washed in your system that needs to be accounted for, rather than just hitting every developer that walks in.
Right, I mean, because something, I'll use not something from last night that's a little too close, but let's take that whole gigantic mall redevelopment now that we're looking at that has so many moving pieces. There wasn't, like, there was just like, oh, this stuff is gonna be part of our responsibility, and this isn't, and it's gonna, but there was never any like, hey, we're making a decision about this gigantic thing. This is how much money it could potentially bring in, but it's gonna cost this much as well. And we didn't have that. It was just sort of like vague.
Yes.
So, 20% of Athens is paying for 80%. Are there other cities that are different? Like, what would New York? Would it?
What was the first question here when you said earlier?
So 20% of Athens is paying for the
Oh,
other
yeah.
80%.
I don't have New York City's data. I can tell you,
Give us an example of a city that's doing better. Like what?
oh, better?
Yeah.
Matt, like I said, you're better than Springfield, good Springfield.
We're better than the country, by the way.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, I can only speak
Springfield.
Missouri. You know, their culture and their community, they're billionaires. This guy who has this incredible business, but he also has this think tank where they teach entrepreneurs how to have transparent books, which is what government is, right? So his thesis is a business should run like an aquarium where everybody can see what goes in, what's moving around, and what comes out. And you want your government to be that way too, so your citizens understand what you're dealing with. This is transparency writ large on the map. You now see what's going on in your community. So you have to make choices. So in Springfield, I think their deficit is 22 million. You know, it's off the top of my head. We've done maybe a dozen of these, and yours is looking the best. The craziest one was Lafayette, Louisiana, where they're at like a $36 million deficit. And that's the thing is like a lot of people don't know this. They don't have this chart. They're just flying blind, moving forward, and just thinking the fish are fine.
I'm still waiting for that tax.
Taxing, let's get into the tax bit. Okay, and if you'll forgive me, I'm gonna change character.
Oh,
I am no longer your consultant.
oh,
I am a taxpayer in the city of Asheville.
okay.
My city and my county adopted reparations in 2020. I've lived there long enough to know that was all lip service and they weren't going to do anything. We got all sorts of national headlines. I don't know if you know that we're the only place where the city and county adopted this. So I challenged my staff. We did this all pro bono. Does the property tax system have inequity baked into it? So we have a red line map. We went ahead and mapped our community based on race. This is my county. And it's Appalachia. It's very white. 18% Black. This is the county. Let's kind of zoom into the city. What a lot of people don't know about the city is it sort of bends around this thing called the Biltmore Estate, not part of our city. And then the Vanderbilts built a big subdivision called Biltmore Forest, which is its own town. 99% white. Across the street is the city with his Shiloh neighborhood, 54% Black. My friend Reggie lives in Shiloh. This is Reggie's house. At the time we did the analysis, Sydney Powell lived in Biltmore Forest. I'm not making this up. Thank you, Georgia, for arresting her. Super awesome. That's her mugshot. She moved to Dallas, by the way. So I grabbed Reggie's house versus Sydney's house, and this is kind of how they look on the street. And then the first thing I looked at was land value because that's typically where you find the inequity. And this checked out. Her dirt is worth more than his dirt. Cool. I'm trained as an architect, and one of the things that really drove me nuts, and I sat down with my assessor, and I said, Keith, explain to me how his house is worth more per square foot than hers. And he started with the whole, it's complicated. I'm like, I got all day. And he's like, well, you know, she's got more square footage. The more square footage you have, the lower the value per square foot. And I'm like, oh, it's like toilet paper. The more house you get, the cheaper. I'm like, come on, man. She's got 4 bathrooms. He's got 1. So that means he's paying more taxes per acre, about $1,000 more per acre. But here's the kicker. In North Carolina, we do our reassessments every 4 years. So from last assessment to this assessment, his value is double the increase versus hers. And she's renovated her property and he hasn't. So can you explain to me what's going on here? And the thing is he wasn't explaining it to me. So we dug deeper. This is our state law. It says the true value of a house shall be the price in which a willing buyer and seller will exchange that land. So no one's putting a gun to my head and forcing me to sell. That's just a willing exchange, right? So this is on the south side of my town. This is what the computer assessed it at. So y'all, the assessor doesn't do all of the assessment. They have a computer model that runs the assessment called the CAMA. So the CAMA assessed that house at this. We pulled the annual, the sale price of it. So be it not for that transaction, if that person didn't move, they'd be overpaying for their government 16%. That's the way I look at that number. It's an overcharge. Now, to their credit, the assessor corrected it down to here. Okay. So that's 100%. So let's look at another one. In this case, the computer underassessed it and the assessor brought it up. So that's cool. So 97% to 100. And then let's go to Wealthy House down on the south side next to Biltmore Forest. So I have to change scales and this is what it sold for and this is what it was assessed at. So I asked the assessor, I said, look, if my kid brought home a test score of 50 on the test, I kind of want to know what happened. So can you walk me through the model and show me what happened? And again, it's complicated. I was like, I got all day. I use this software too. So help me out. Now, here's why I didn't trust the assessor. That's the test score. Here's what he actually reassessed it at after the test. So with the test score sitting right there, why are these folks being brought up to 100 and that person's at 64%? This last one's one of my favorites. The moral courage to bring it up 1 whole percentage point. Boy, you're really doing us a service here. Again, my community was not happy that this was happening. So this person is paying full freight. How many of them and their neighbors does it take to cover that subsidy? And we ran the math on it. It's basically 6 or 5 properties are subsidizing the one house on the side of the mountain. What's going on here is you have a tax system that was set up at a certain period, and we're not interrogating it because it seems complex, it seems complicated, it seems too difficult. What's going on in our system is the tax system of the poorest person in the community and the wealthiest person in the community. Data science says you should be taking 10% buckets across the board. The average tax bill for each 10%, the error that's happening in the computer should be about the same for all of them. That's called equal taxation or uniform taxation. That's what your state constitution has in it and my state constitution. This is what's actually going on in my county. So the bottom 40% are being overcharged and the top 60%, which I'm one of them. I'm kind of in here somewhere. But basically overcharge of $1 million and undercharge of $6 million for a total tax subsidy of $7 million. I reached out to the county commissioners. I said, y'all started a reparations committee. First rule of reparations is do no harm. Second rule is until you fix it, you got to equalize. So you owe the reparations committee $7 million. They thanked me with rose petals. I mean, you probably remember the award that I got from my state. I'm kidding. The county hit me with a $600 tax penalty for my business. I'm not going to shut up about this. So what we showed our county is this is just the land value change in 1 year. Just use the software to think differently. And you can see this one property way out here. It just, your dirt shouldn't change that quickly. So just fix it. But going into my neighborhood, this is the dirt value change in my neighborhood. This is all one neighborhood. It's a 1920 streetcar neighborhood called Montford. Here's downtown right here. I asked the assessor, I said, what's going on right here? And he said, that's a different tax neighborhood code. Inside my neighborhood, there's different neighborhoods. And I asked him, I said, who drew that map? And he goes, well, I don't know. So when you get into the neighborhood, 2 properties side by side. The dirt under this house went up 316%, and the dirt right across the property line only went up 102. So I'm trained as a city planner. What I know happened is Montfort Avenue was where the streetcar ran. All the rich white people lived on the streetcar line. All of their help lived in the neighborhood in little pockets. That legacy effect of where that pocket was drawn into the tax system. And that penalty was put on people of color in my neighborhood. And it's still there today. So back to Reggie's neighborhood, notice how all the neighborhood codes are level. So what we've become comfortable with is, hey, it's not your fault, it's my fault. Joe, you moved into that neighborhood and set the new value. It's gentrification. We can't change that in Reggie's neighborhood, right? So that's, you read the law, what somebody will pay for the property. Okay, cool. When you cross the street and go into the richest neighborhood in the entire state, notice how there's 2 transactions right there that don't affect the rest of the neighborhood code. Why does policy work one way on one side of the street and a different way on the other side of the street? Now explain that to me. So it gets better. This is a 22-acre parcel on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So this is oceanfront for us in Asheville. It's an incredible park. It's a 16,000 square foot house with a 3,500 square foot finished basement. The basement is bigger than my house. And I'll just let y'all read the property bill here. So this is it in 2011. The tax bill of that property was $4 million. This should be a $25 million property. 2021, the tax bill is, what does that say?
3 million or less.
Not only is it about a quarter or a tenth of its value, it's also losing a quarter of its value. Did y'all know that? So we did an over under in that neighborhood, and these are all the properties that are dogs in there. Basically, 55% of the properties are losing value for a net loss of $40 million in that neighborhood. So, ma'am, I'm starting right now. We're going to start an urban renewal program for the Chads and the Brads of the world. They really need our help. This blight cannot stand. Feel bad.
I'm in.
Yeah. So what's going on in my community, in this part of the community at least, that neighborhood is underpaying 4.4 million while that neighborhood is overpaying 1.5 million. So I've done this math for my county, and I will continue to do this publicly until they change the system. That was 5 years ago. So $4.4 million, what that means is we're not paying for 111 school teachers. So we've given you a lot of math, and I'm showing you this because there's a lot of other math that you should be doing as well in your community. There's sort of a reverse Robin Hood baked into the system. So that's my county. Sorry, right there. It's not flat. These are the 17 counties around my county. Y'all see a pattern? So all of them are inequitous. I can pull up your county in a second if you want to see it.
Yes.
Want to see it? All right.
Who we need to fire?
You don't fire anybody. It's just, a lot of this is just have the conversation and talk it through and look at the data.
Have your conversations gotten anywhere?
My assessor got fired.
Charge you, huh?
Let's see here. So this is University of Chicago. There's this report up here. I went and got Clark County. Here's your tax analysis from them. So it's all kind of bunched up here, but basically, let's look at this chart right here. The bottom 30, 40%, 50%, 60%. Red is overassessed, green is underassessed. Your top 30%, you're more likely to be underassessed than overassessed. The effective tax rate looks something like this. And it's not a big swing, but it's basically, what is that, 1.9% tax here versus 0.9 here is a difference. So the bottom 10% are overpaying about $122 a year. Now, to be fair, your wealthiest 10% are overpaying $3,000. The next tier below them, the top 90% is underpaying $300. According to this math.
Show what the
Oh,
average.
the average house value here,
Second, yes.
about 500,000. So the $2 million Kirby Smart, you're charging him at, don't let him know.
$15 million salary, you got it.
Anyway, this is just, use this as a start of a conversation. This is the math. Back to that presentation, one of the things that I want to talk with you about,
And that's Chicago.
University of Chicago.
You're gonna send that to us, right?
I'll get you all the links. So this is a presentation I did last week in Charlottesville, and I used that segment. And I'll make the same argument here. When I go to our nightclub and there's feedback happening from the stage, I can talk to the sound engineer and say what happened, what knob to turn. Your assessor needs to be able to tell you those knobs. You need to be asking for the feedback, right? It can't be, it's complicated, it's too difficult. Most assessors believe in fair and equity, in fairness. So your assessor's going to be in line with the fairness and equity conversation. It's understanding how the knobs work and having that conversation. They might not even be looking at this yet. So New York State in 2024, this is what the Supreme Court said in New York State. Nearly everyone agrees that the property tax system is inequitable, opaque, and puts a burden on low-income people. Mayors have tried to change it. It results in racial and economic disparities. That's the New York State Supreme Court in 2024. It's also New York State in 1873 saying the exact same thing. We have to go back in time to realize when these systems were put in place and why they were put in place. And property tax system and what happened with communities really shifted post-Civil War. It's part of Reconstruction, or the tearing down of Reconstruction, that these things happen. But this is a book from 1895 right here that says the property tax system is so flagrantly inequitable that it can only be explained through ignorance and inertia. What I've given you with all of the ROI analysis, that's the way out of this, is to understand the cost and consequences of what you're trying to do here, which is run a corporation. The property tax system, the way that it's designed, is not fair because it's arbitrary. What's your value compared to my value? Why do we even do that? The cost of this clicker, Logitech knew what the cost of the plastic was before they charged me for it. So we're essentially operating off dial rotary phone technology for our government. Meanwhile, we have computers that can run you these crazy models to show you what's going on. So I know that I've pushed the limits on my 45 minutes here, well beyond that. But I wanted to share this with you because I do care about equity, and the tax system is one of the big problems.
Wow.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Thank you.
Joe, thank you.
We're gonna get this, right?
Yeah.
Copy of this, like, yeah.
Whatever.
Got like 3 times the amount of more slides, actually.
I mean,
Don't get all of it.
okay.
Do we, is it the slideshow and something else, or what is it? I mean.
We typically don't do like big documents and white papers because it's a waste of time.
Yeah, no, I just want to, I mean,
So
this is
They
like,
give you this whole thing as a PDF.
okay.
With the text.
Yeah.
That's important.
I mean, if there's back like end of data, like that might be fun to, that's something.
It's just, what's the cost of pipe, put it on a map. That's it. It's like, it's not that complicated.
So one of the things to maybe scratch the itch on that question, staff worked with Joe's staff to give the data. So none of this was put together by some third-party source. All of the data that they used was provided by us. So not only can we access it, we provide it. We keep up with it, we manage it. It's how we choose to use it that is the question. And part of the takeaway of this exercise is not to have this as a one-off. Part of this is to create an expectation, if this body feels so inclined, to make this a routine event, to make this into something that is part of your regular decision-making. And we can talk about what frequency that is. Is that, like I said at the top, is that annually? Or do you want to see some sort of assessment with each zoning action? Or do you want this to be part of your budgeting exercise? Do you want this to be something that when departments are pulling together their budget submittals, it makes it through the manager's office and up? There's a bunch of different ways that this can be delivered. But the key takeaway is he's working with stuff that we gave him.
So you could, so the stuff that you gave him, let's say, one of the things You know, where I started off saying, well, Unity East Side, my East Side examples that would resonate with, there's no one left from my, side of the community, but would resonate with the people who live on that side. It just becomes more real, right? But you might be able to pull a couple of places to make that kind of comparison. I said, hey, I want to have a town hall in September.
So some of this is proprietary,
Yeah.
like, there is a model that Joe has, and it's awesome. We have entered into this contract with a bit of a train the trainer approach.
Yeah.
So the takeaway here is, to the extent that he's able to provide us with the things that aren't all the magic sauce, but the things that we can put together and keep up with on our own, we want to have the staff capacity to do so. But it does create an expectation that it's not just the planning department's job to do this. Transportation, Public Works, Public Utilities, the tax assessor, the finance department. I mean, it's all the way across the board. Everybody has to get used to keeping up with the data, knowing that you're going to be revealing it and using it with regularity for y'all to make decisions.
Could the new strategic and budget, whatever department, could they be able to tackle that every year?
So the fact that you've taken our mapping, our GIS folks, and put them together with our budgeting, that's absolutely syncs up with those two pieces coming together. I don't know that that's part of the expectations that were handed to them. So that's a conversation we have to have. And that predates Brad. So, how all that was put together becomes a question.
Work.
So, we talk about the inequities in taxation. Do we have the authority to tweak that assessment process? I mean, our assessor is a separate elected
Nope.
official, and the state has some pretty stringent control over how we do this stuff.
So I know Joe is going to say, yeah, yes, you do have the chance. I will say from a staff perspective, and not speaking on behalf of our attorney's office, who works very closely with Kirk's group to do this work, there are things that we can revisit, and we do revisit all the time. It's how we go about revisiting them that I think we can ask the question. There are some things we just have to do. But the question is, everybody's goal is to be compliant with state law. Everybody's goal is to do it the right way. And so if we have to break some muscle tissue and kind of undo some muscle memory on, well, that's just how we've been doing it, I think that's what your message is, right?
Yeah, this is a behavior change. I'm throwing different questions at you because it's all your stuff that we're just showing differently. But like in the case of the assessor, they can assess Airbnbs as commercial. They're not, because they haven't done it in the past. That's an easy one. That's just like, why are you going to a hotel and valuing it commercially? And
Thinking of rental properties in our single family neighborhoods that are functioning as student boarding houses. And
those
$1,000
those should be commercial as well.
But we don't even know this stuff until somebody from somewhere else comes and tells us this.
Yeah.
And
we know it. We know.
no, I don't know it. I didn't know about the tech stuff.
I look on the maps all the time.
But then that's the values we need to be talking about, and retreats and meetings and work sessions, not some of the stuff that we be talking about. I'm just thinking again, I know my district is just out of line across the board. I thank Bruce and staff and Brad for trying to get us caught up. But if I don't know the right questions to ask,
Right.
I don't know. And if somebody doesn't tell me, I don't even know what the qualifications are to be a tax assessor. He could have been, I don't know. So, but I do
In
think,
North Carolina, you only need to have actually, you know what? Let me show you something. I show it?
yes, please, show me. Show me.
Fire back up.
Put back in there.
No, you're still in.
So, in North Carolina, you have to have a high school education, pass a test. That's it. So
A high school education.
high school education.
Access system?
So you all elect yours,
No, actually, it's our commissioner we elect. Our
commissioners. Okay.
collects, actually does the collecting, but not necessarily.
Okay, well, in North, the test that they took, so one of my staff, who's a massive nerd, he came up to me one day, he's like, I'm gonna take the test to be an assessor, and I'm like, you go. And he does, and so I paid for it, and he sends me the screenshot from the assessor's test, and I'm like, hell no, are they teaching this? Does four colors look familiar to you?
The red line.
It's the same colors as redlining, it means the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I have a degree in urban design and in architecture. I understand the history of city planning. I understand all these policies that happen. I know about redlining. I know all of this stuff. If you're just passing a test and you have no understanding about redlining, but you're being trained on that dial. First thing I did is I called up Larry and I was like, dude, you got to get rid of that. And he's like, oh my, I'm like, yeah. So how many assessors have taken that test and just assumed that the natural cycle of life is that you have those four colors? And the other thing I always ask assessors is like, how is it the green line neighborhoods have never declined? How have they always been wonderful? And they just can't answer that because this is the definition of systemic bias and systemic racism, right? And if you build a system that has that, I'm not allowed to say that federally anymore, but this is what's going on. So that system was created. It's a book called The Black Tax. This is a University of Virginia professor that's documented this whole thing. So, I usually don't get all into this stuff in my presentations, but we have to have these kind of conversations. They're uncomfortable, but the systems need to get rooted out.
So, that's not to say that the decision-making or the things that have been represented to you have been done in a disingenuous way. I think, and I just want to restate it, because I think you've said it, but I'm going to say it again. There are so many patterns that are just not questioned and haven't been revisited. And I think that's the point. So this is an object lesson. It's a valuable one for our taxation that Joe's dealing with in Asheville. I don't know that it's true here, but we've got some data that suggests in that University of Chicago report, we've got some separation. But the bigger point for us, though, is our land use too. We've got some patterns of behavior that maybe we need to revisit. Maybe we need to do better. We don't have to completely rewrite our book on how we do things, but we don't need to continue our trend line going in a way that is putting us in a deficit.
Back to your financial question, if you could have, one is that nutritional fact sheet when you're making decisions. Can we set up a 2-drink minimum? That as a community, we need to get this much value out of that property to be able to break even. If we go below that, there's going to be a value exchange. We're going to get like a daycare center or something that we need to subsidize or something, but it shouldn't just be for me to just do a strip mall. That's what's going on in your community. The more parking I put in, the cheaper the building, the lower the taxes. It has nothing to do.
Or you get some stormwater and sewer benefits.
Something. There's got to be a trade-off. Yeah.
And that's the part, Bruce, I know that, being staff, you gotta be delicate. We got a problem here. And, I just think when you put on the table, instead of a few people trying to fix it, all of us could work on, that,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. And now you've made me think about a tax issue that one of my constituents had. So now I gotta go follow back up on that. So I was taken care of. But I do appreciate those open conversations. I'm the main person who did not want to be here today. Probably gotten the most out of it. Thank you.
Thanks.
The value we're getting out of land, I think this is like the thing that you were saying earlier in terms of how much it costs to run the community. I mean, I think sometimes when you say we're just gonna get this value out because we want more money, it's not because it's like me getting money to be able to repair my roof and plan for how I'm gonna change out my heating system in 10 years.
Well,
So anyway, I mean, because I think when you start talking to people about, we just have to get money out of this, it's like, what's that government trying to do? But it's really taking care of our whole
Yeah.
ecosystem.
But again, I don't think that some of the stuff that we invest in brings an economic value. I mean, it might, tangible, it might have an economic health, so we've got to figure out how much do we need to get back as far as dollars are concerned, and what do we invest in that has intrinsic value. I think that's one thing, but I don't know how you measure that. I don't even know, we've never discussed it. Because I think, Athens is a very charitable place to live. I really do. And, but we've got to figure out how we maintain that being charitable as we are. I don't think we talk about that enough. So, and we surely do not want the burden to be on poor people.
Right. Well, that's clear.
Carry, the burden. So, no, this was excellent. So I'm gonna go and Texas and tell everybody to go to all the signs.
Joe, got a meeting tomorrow at 10:55, Barbara,
Good morning.
in the morning, then at White Central, morning.
6 o'clock.
At 10 o'clock at the chamber and 6 o'clock.
10 o'clock at 10:55 bar with the chamber, right?
By the time.
At the high school at 6. That's right.
Thanks again, John. You have Joe's contact information. I'm not gonna beg for his card. I wanna
Thank
come to
you.
you.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Well, no, he's gonna give me a card. Probably did it.